Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, and I should have released this video yesterday, but I did not really know whether I was going to do a video on this particular subject or not. But I thought that it would be appropriate to kind of do this video now. For those of you, of course, once again, that mainly know my channel, you know that I mainly talk about that of boxing. But at times, I also will talk about MMA because I've been involved with the sport for quite a while, at least overall with watching it, trained a little bit in it as well. Certainly not a professional by any means, but overall, certainly have been involved with watching the sport overall and training at least slightly in it for, a little bit now. But MMA, certainly, in my view, is one of the more entertaining sports out there. No doubt about it. And of course, I also talk about tennis, NBA basketball, and NFL football. But this fight, of course, yesterday was going to be a very particularly interesting one. It was going to prove who was the true number one pound for pound fighter in all the UFC. I had Alexander Volkanovski as the number one pound for pound fighter before this fight. But what Islam Makhachev, I believe is how you pronounce his name, at least that's the way I've heard it being pronounced. It could be Makhachev, but I believe it's Makhachev or Makhachev, somewhere around there. But anyways, what Mr. Islam showed, in my view, yesterday was that he truly is, at least at the current moment in time, the true number one pound for pound fighter. And certain people, of course, I've seen say that they said this fight was a robbery, and certain people are saying that they believe that Alexander Volkanovski won. And I'm just going to break it down like this. In my opinion, the right man ended up winning the fight. I had Islam Makhachev winning, I believe, about 3 rounds to 2. The first round, I think that Volkanovski had a chance to win, but then later on, I believe Islam ended up knocking him down, even though it wasn't really actually with a solid punch in the replay, it was with his forearm. But at the end of the day, the judges don't know that, and according to their eyes, it was a knockdown. And then, of course, I believe he was able to. Man, I can't remember if he got him down or not necessarily 100%, but he did have him up against the cage, landed some strikes. So that first round has to go to Islam. The second round was very decently competitive. I believe that Alex even, I believe, knocked him down potentially, but Islam, of course, was able to get him down, I believe, and he was able to be a little bit more dominant. The third round, I clearly gave to Alexander Volkanovski. The fourth round clearly had to go to Islam because he was on Alexander's back the whole entire time. And the fifth round, of course, has to go to Alexander. It truly was a fight that could have potentially went either way. But this is just my view on it. Personally, for the way that Alexander Volkanovski was actually able to handle Islam Makhachev's wrestling, I thought that his striking was very, very subpar. I thought that his striking overall was very disappointing. I thought that it was very one dimensional. I thought that his defensive ability, even though he always has had that little weakness of not really covering up when he dips his head back, when it comes down, he's gotten hit with that multiple times against Brian Ortega, Max Holloway, so he'll have to work on that. But I thought that his striking was very, very bad compared to his usual standards in this fight. A lot of the punches that he was landing, I thought were complete haymakers and just really were not that accurate. I thought that he should have been working more off his jab. I thought that he clearly should have went after Islam's legs early on in the fight. If a wrestler like that is going to try and strike with you early on, because it was very clear, in my opinion, that Islam was trying to prove a point that he could outstrike someone like an Alexander Volkanovski. So, overall, I think that he made some very, very bad errors in the fight, and I think that's what cost him the fight. I thought, once again, that his striking was not good in the fight. I thought that his defensive ability was not really that good in the fight. I think he got hit with way too many punches, and it's not like either man really landed that many punches against the other gentleman. But at the end of the day, you're not supposed to be getting outstriked like that against a main wrestler. Now, some people may say, well, maybe Islam is a little bit of a better striker than what you're giving him credit for. Yes, but Alexander Volkanovski is supposed to be debatably the best striker throughout the whole entire UFC. And I would still say, all in all, that potentially that he could be. But after that fight that I seen yesterday, the question is this: did Volkanovski just have a bad night because he was so worried about the wrestling? And obviously, he did gain a little bit of weight. Maybe that could have affected the stamina. Volkanovski, if he's going to have a rematch with that of Islam, he needs to go after the legs a hell of a lot more. He needs to overall try to strike to the legs when it comes down to it. all in all, his striking needs to be much more multi-dimensional. He needs to use that jab. He needs to use the leg kicks. He needs to use that straight right hand. He also just needs to mix it up, go to the body, go to the head, use that jab. A lot of the times he was trying to throw these pivot punches or these haymakers on the inside, which a lot of the times just would not work. He needed to be more technical in this fight, and I think even Alexander admitted that he underestimated Islam's striking. And had he not done that, he could have easily won this fight. I'm not going to say easily won the fight, but he could have been the one that won 3 rounds to 2. And I've seen certain people, including Joe Rogan, saying that they truly believe that Alexander Volkanovski ended up winning the fight. No, he truly did not end up winning the fight. And I was actually rooting for Volkanovski to win the fight because I think that he's a very spectacular fighter. But his performance, especially in the striking category, in my opinion, was very disappointing. Very disappointing, no doubt about it. I thought that his striking compared to his usual standards, very subpar. Not great defense in the fight. Very one-dimensional striking a lot of the times in this fight when it came down to it, not using angles quite as much. Now, once again, this also could be because of the size and the weight. We've seen something a little bit with Canelo Alvarez and Dimitri Bivol as of recently, where Canelo, he went up in weight, and he clearly did not look overall up to his usual standards. And it was very clear that they added on weight, that it affected him, and also the skill set and the size of Dimitri Bivol, that it ended up getting to him. Excuse me. But like I said, Volkanovski, if he's going to rematch Islam Makhachev, I'm not really sure if this fight's going to end up in the same way, because even Islam after the fight admitted that he underestimated his grappling to a certain degree. And it's one of those fights to where I don't know if you're really going to do quite as well in a second chance. Now, Volkanovski stated that he's really not even going to fight at 155 pounds next anyway, that he's going to fight at 154 pounds, which in my opinion is the right thing to do. Reflect on your loss and see overall what you could do. But what I'll give Alexander Volkanovski credit for is that he even admitted, I believe in the post-fight interview, that he made certain mistakes and that he could have done a hell of a lot more in this fight. And that's one thing I'll give him credit for. Because many fighters, when they end up losing a fight, they say, oh, I got robbed or this and that. They could be a Nate Diaz or a Nick Diaz or a Deontay Wilder. But Volkanovski didn't do that. He actually manned up. He admitted his loss and he said, you know what? The only way that I'm going to get better from this is if I admit my mistakes. And I made a multitude of mistakes in this fight. And he sure did. And it ended up costing him the fight. No doubt about it. A very, very close fight. A fight that was a lot tougher than I once originally thought that it was going to be. That's one thing I'll give Volkanovski. I think that it was a hell of a lot tougher than what I once imagined. But do I believe that this rematch will be close? If there is a rematch between the two of them, it's tough to say. Because Islam may tune up on his wrestling a little bit. He may take him more seriously. There's really no way of measuring to see how seriously Islam took his grappling and if he's going to be much better at countering Volkanovski in the rematch. And there's also no way of measuring to see how much better Volkanovski is going to be with the striking. But Volkanovski had certain holes in this fight to where he needs to work on things. His striking defense needs to be a little bit better. He needs to keep his hands up a little bit more when it comes down to it, especially work on when you dip back, because a lot of the times people are able to hit him with a right hand. In Islam's case, I believe a left hand. Overall, when he just dips back and he doesn't really keep he keeps his right hand up, but still overall the left side of his face is completely open. So he has to be very, very careful with that. And that's not the first time that he's ended up getting caught with that punch. So he has to be very careful. His striking defense has to get better when it comes down to it, in my opinion. And that's one main thing that he has to work on. Now, we'll see overall how he handles Yair Rodriguez. In my personal opinion, if the best version of Volkanovski shows up, I believe that he will be Yair Rodriguez. Yair Rodriguez has gotten better, but I always thought that in terms of certain striking, that he was a bit limited. But what I'll give him credit for is this. He seems a lot better overall now than once upon a time what he was. He seems to certainly have gotten better. He actually almost beat Max Holloway in his last fight, from what I remember. I believe I scored it 3 rounds to 2 for Max, but gave him a very, very tough fight. So, But anyways, that's really about it. I just thought that I would break that down. I thought overall that it was a very, very particularly interesting fight. Great fight on both gentlemen, but in my opinion, Volkanovski, I thought that his striking was subpar in this fight. That's just my personal view, but it is what it is. Anyways, that's really about it for today. Thank you so much for watching. Congratulations to Mr. Islam Makhachev. what is next for him. We'll see what happens. It could be a Dustin Poirier fight. It could be a Justin Gaethje fight. It could be a Charles Oliveira rematch. It could be the winner of Michael Chandler versus that overall of Conor McGregor, who I believe, those two are going in a fight next. So, like I said, we will see what ends up happening next. As for Volkanovski, probably the Yair Rodriguez fight. So we'll see what ends up happening here. But I did end up getting my prediction right. I thought Islam was going to win the fight. I just did not think it was going to be anywhere near that competitive. So I must give Alexander Volkanovski a hell of a lot of credit. I thought that the size, I thought that the wrestling was going to be way, way, way too much. Now one could argue that maybe Volkanovski did so well because Islam was maybe trying to outstrike him a little bit and maybe not utilizing the wrestling quite as seriously or as much. Maybe one could argue that. But one could also argue that maybe Volkanovski gave Islam a little bit more of a tougher time than once upon a time what he originally thought. And he even admitted that. But once again, the question would be is this, if a rematch ends up happening, how would it turn out? And I really have no idea. It would be very interesting, but I would have to predict Islam Makhachev to win again. So we'll see what happens. But anyways, that's really about it for today. Great fight. Truly a great fight. A little bit disappointed in Volkanovski's performance because I thought that he clearly could have done more to win the fight. And I think for a fight of this magnitude, if you were able to compete with Islam Makhachev in the wrestling, that you could have been more intelligent, that you could have been better, that overall that you could have adjusted better. Period. Point blank. So I personally thought that Volkanovski's performance, even though many people will say, oh, no one gives Islam, that tough of a fight. Right, but you're supposed to debatably be the best striker in the UFC. I thought that his performance, in my opinion, to be quite honest with you, besides the wrestling, I thought that it was a little bit disappointing, in my opinion, but it is what it is. But anyways, that's really about it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you all later.